Hey, today we talking about state takeover, and we're gonna talk about the ethics in that. Come on back on the other side so we can explain exactly what we're talking about and get into these debates. Go. Oh, and welcome back to another episode of the South Star Classroom. That's Omar. That's David. Jubilee is on in the motherland. She's on a different continent right now. So we are texting with her. She will be missed. I'm sure she would have had a lot to chime in on this topic, but I'm very excited because after we do our intros, you know, Omar has sent us some articles that's just talking about some stuff going on in Texas. But before we do that, David, how are you today, brother? What is new with you?
I am good. Hopefully to not have any technical difficulties today. But let's see. We've been on a 2-week spring break, so it's ending this weekend to go back to school on Monday. And yeah, it's still very cold here in Southern California. I mean, we haven't. It's normally
What's very
warming
cold?
up. Very cold is like in
60.
the 60s, man. Yeah.
That's very cool.
But it should be like in the 80s. My pool water is still not naturally up to where it needs to be.
The struggle is real, man. My God.
It is, man. I'm telling
my
you,
hot tub ain't cold enough.
Listen. There's this thing about like, you know, I'm a brown man, but I'm a brown man, and I can have first world problems. So my first world problems are my pool heater, my spa heater is not working. So it's been about a week, and yeah, man, the struggle is real, but I'm glad to be here with both of you.
Oh my God! With that being said, Omar, tell us about the pains of your life, good brother.
Oh man, listen, I'm trying to go on a whole self-growth journey, trying to improve myself, and then I get distracted by Gwyneth Paltrow's overly white case trial. I mean, literally, you couldn't have asked for like a wider case trial if Wonder Bread was prosecuting mayonnaise. And then, speaking of prosecution, Donald Trump done gone to jail, but like this man got asked how he wanted to be arraigned. Like, didn't get a mugshot, didn't get handcuffed. He could have done his arraignment on Zoom, and they asked him, when would be a convenient time for you, sir? So I'm trying to do all this self-growth right now, realizing we live in a crazy-ass world. The week's been weird as hell. Doc, how you been, man?
It be like that, man. I will just say this. If you're going on a thing about self-discovery and self-improvement, what them people got going on ain't got nothing to do with you. You got to go.
That's exactly correct. Oh, no, you got nothing to do. But I got to throw in the jokes to add levity to the show.
I feel you. Hey, man, I'm not mad at you. I'm just saying that's a good way that we stop our own progress because of what somebody else doing. But nah, man, I've been good. I'm working on these projects. They kind of slapping me up a little bit, man. But it's good. I've been doing a lot of work on my basement today. I've been in my basement for the last 6-7 hours just working, just writing, and I get a lot of my best writing done there. And yeah, I'll send it to the group. I am if you're gonna be spending that much time doing anything, it might as well be in a place that you love. So I've been doing that. Been thinking about ways that we can improve the show, and we all been working on that stuff. So if you are watching, we need you to like, we need you to share, we need you to subscribe, and share this with your people, man, so we can keep having these conversations. David, I have to grab something real quick, but I'm gonna throw it to Omar in the full screen. Omar, why don't you introduce this topic, because this was a topic, like I said, it seems to be pretty close and near and dear to your heart, and it's in your line of work. But I know everybody out there is not really familiar with state takeover and what that is. So it's all yours, brother.
Right on. So our major topic for today is that in the headlines, the Texas Education Agency, TEA, has essentially taken over Houston ISD. Houston ISD is here in Texas. It's believe the 4th largest independent school district in the country, next to LA, New York, Chicago. It is 200,000 students. Now, what does this mean? So the Texas Education Agency has criteria basically saying, hey, if you've had a failing school for what is essentially, 5 years straight, we have every right to come in and essentially take over the district. What a takeover means can mean two different things. And I'll probably get into the details a little bit later in the show. But the takeover of Houston essentially is they're going to fire the entirety of the board of directors and find a new superintendent, put in what's called a board of managers, people that they appoint themselves, with the hope of essentially demonstrating that, hey, we're going to solve and ameliorate the problems of either failing schools or fiscal mismanagement. So for those of you that are out there and you're like, hey man, like the school district is spending money willy-nilly, they're not doing things right, it doesn't look like they're using taxpayer funding well, or hey man, this school, like no one's done anything for the last 5 years, 3 years is also a benchmark. What is anyone doing about it? This is what can be done. So we're going to have a lively debate about whether or not this is the state holding a school district accountable or if this is just hardline overreach when they're trying to solve the problem and they're like, yeah, sorry, we're going to solve it for you. So this is a lively ass debate in terms of this is a real thing. It happened in Oakland, and we're going to get into that. I'll get into what's happened with Austin ISD because something similar happened with them. I'll discuss the differences. But just to introduce the idea, yes, ladies and gentlemen, if a school district isn't doing things well, they are accountable to the state. And here the state has demonstrated their power by essentially dissolving their board of directors and firing their superintendent, all of which will be appointed in June. So, gentlemen, hot takes.
Well, yeah, and as we jump into that, David, I know you and I both had some experience with this, but you've had much more than I had. I wasn't working in the system when those initial takeovers took place. So, what does that look like in California? Is it any different than what Omar was describing? I'm sure that there are some nuanced differences or whatnot, but can you just help the viewers understand what happens in California during that process?
Yeah, so absolutely. And let me get to that. But first, I want to kind of helicopter up to the 30,000 foot level, looking across the entirety of the landscape in our 50 states. So we have 50 states with about 12 to 13,000 school districts across the 50 states. Not all of our states have takeover laws written into their state constitutions, right? Right now, or as of a couple of years ago, the number was hovering at about 33 to 35 of the 50 states had some kind of a takeover provision. Okay, so not all states we're talking about. As of 2017, of the 33 states that had takeover laws, 22 of the 33 had actually initiated some kind of takeover of a school district, right? So that it's not just happening in Texas, it's happening in California. It's happened in particular cities like that we know of: Detroit, New Orleans, Newark, Camden, Philadelphia, and others. So the trend there is that when you look at where this is happening, the districts, these are not like suburban districts. They may not be rural districts. They tend to be urban school districts that serve a high percentage of Black and brown students. So it's a perfect topic for us to discuss. I know the districts that Omar is talking about serve high numbers of Black and brown students. So just some high level for the viewers. In Oakland, California, and then there was a second case in, I believe, Compton Unified, which is in the Los Angeles area. Oakland was taken over by the state in the state of California in about 2003, I believe. It was initiated because of a fiscal deficit of $37 million that the school district found itself in. Now, in today's math, 37 million is like really nothing when you're talking about a large school district. But back then, it triggered a takeover. And what that takeover looked like is they still had an elected school board, but they had no power, right? They even had like elections, but the board had zero power to vote. The state came in with an administrator, and the administrator essentially single-handedly ran the school district. So I know in some districts it looks different where they'll reconstitute the leadership, the governance structures, but in California, it's kind of like you have these like talking heads where they can go up and talk and debate issues, but the ultimate decisions in a school district that a board would make are made by one person, the state administrator. So I'll stop there. That's what it looks like in California.
All right, so we got this. So for the people listening, Omar and David have done this great job of just kind of setting up this premise around, okay, look, there are around 35 states in the union had these provisions for districts in their states where if it's that bad, we can take it over, fiscal issues, whatever issues or whatever, right? So Omar, you brought us this large, I mean, I guess this larger topic of government overreach or accountability. Like, I guess, how do you want us to take on this topic, right? Like, do we think that, do you think that government takeover is something that is fascist, or that states should absolutely be, be utilizing if kids are getting a terrible education?
Yeah. So look, I want to provide some background really quickly, but I want to start some shit, because ultimately, like, every time that a school shuts down, it's pandemonium. Like, you're shutting down our school, you're shutting down our community center, you're shutting down this, you're shutting down that. So like, I want you to imagine something. Your kid is at Wheatley High School in Houston ISD. Your kid's in high school. You love this high school, but like, this high school, like, do you ask your kid, hey, like, how are you learning? How are you doing on the state test? What's your progress like? And your kid's like, I don't know, we're just having a good time. Is that an adequate enough response for you as a parent? Now, Wheatley High School in Houston that your kid attends has failed miserably for 9 straight years. So I got to ask some things, like, why are you all so riled up about shutting down schools, but you're not riled up about holding schools accountable when they're failing your children? So when we talk about this state accountability and overreach thing, I want to jump in and basically be like, yo, if my kid was at this high school and this high school didn't do jack shit for 9 years, I'd be all about the state taking them over. I'd be like, yo, no one's doing anything. Cool, come on in. And when the state comes in, not only do they have the right, and it's usually 5 consecutive years they can shut down a high school. Here, Wheatley was failing for 9. And like I said, they can fire the entire board of directors. Not can, that's what they are doing. Fire the entire board, setting up an entire board of managers. That is, they're local, by the way. It ain't like some cats from Austin and stuff. Like, they're finding people from Houston who have a background in law and finance and academics, who are parents or community leaders. That's who they're setting up to be the board of managers. And then they work with the state to appoint a new superintendent. Now, here's what's up. If a school like Wheatley starts passing academic measures for 2 years straight, done. The state leaves. They put back the elected members, the previously elected members of the board, unless their term got termed out, in which case they got to go again. And then they'll still provide oversight. Now, what's going on in Austin ISD, because I want to start some more shit, is like, imagine your kid is perhaps in need of being tested for special education. And that could be anything from like what's called a 504, like dyslexia, like, can they read well? Or is there like an ADHD situation, all the way to like learning disabilities, which classifies as special education. Well, Austin ISD wasn't diagnosing shit and misdiagnosing, and then pulling off a scandal where we didn't want to diagnose those kids, because if we did, then we have to provide them services, and that costs money. So now the state of Texas has provided called a conservatorship over Austin ISD, which means you get to keep your superintendent and the board of directors, but we as a state, we're on top of you. We're bringing in people to oversee that you solve this problem. And then Austin ISD came out with a statement that's like, we're excited to work with the state. I'm like, yeah, man, you're excited to finally do what you should have been doing for kids years ago. So I think when it comes to this situation, I want to ask you gentlemen, because the minute they shut down a school, it's like, this is racist. They're shutting down our school. They're shutting down our community. And I'm like, well, like the school was kind of dog shit. And like, it wasn't serving kids. So like, either you're going to shut that sucker down and revamp it and bring in a brand new staff, or create a new school where kids are actually learning. So I'm going to just take the stance that like, I'm kind of for this like accountability component, and I'm not about this overreach. But I bet you someone like maybe Toya or one of our parents or one of our like audience members be like, you can't just come in and shut down a school. And I'm like, why not?
And as you go there, we're going to throw it to you, David, but I want to send a special, and I didn't get a chance to tell you guys this before the show, special love, special hugs, special kisses from everybody from the South Star Classroom to Miss Toya, who just lost her mother a few days ago. Our hearts are with you. We will miss you in the comments today, but we will hold your seat warm for whenever you come back. So David, Omar just laid it out. Basically how you feel about state takeovers, man. Like, he gave us a compelling piece around accountability. Is this government overreach? Is these fascists, man? Or is it like, we actually maybe some states need to be snatching up some more districts?
Yeah, a couple of different points on that. I'll start with the more like philosophical one, which is a school district is a public school district, is an arm of the government. So, and it's an arm of the local government, the county government, the state government, and the federal government. So at the end of the day, these are all government entities. So I don't believe there's an actual thing I understand overreach from the public government sphere into the private sphere or the quasi public sphere, as in charter school overreach, which may not be fully like public acting agencies, but you're talking about one level of government providing oversight and accountability to another level of government. So from the state house to the school district boardroom. I don't think that's overreach. I think that's accountability. So I don't really buy into the argument that it's overreach, because it's, at the end of the day, it's still public, it's public money, and we have to have accountability built into both our school districts, our city governments, our county governments, our state governments. The government is supposed to run for the people, and if it's not serving the people in terms of opportunity and academic outcomes, et cetera, then you have an issue. So that's like my philosophical take on it. I do want to also comment on, and I don't know if Omar takes this for granted, but when he talks about the accountability measures that they have in place in Texas, like these just don't exist elsewhere. Mm-hmm. California has totally washed its hands of any accountability around, for the most part, from financial, fiscal to operational to academic, any kind of accountability. It's like, okay, you're a district, you're in debt, 20% of your kids can read on grade level. And so we're going to go and we're going to give you more money. We're going to conduct a study. And then we're going to come back in 2 years and see what happens. But there's no real point where there's any kind of accountability. We've totally abandoned that in California. So the concept of what they're doing in Texas, of the 5-year cycles and an actual system of metrics with numbers and percentages attached to it, feels very foreign to me. Yet it's something that I feel like more states should be actually doing, because if you're not doing that, then you're living in the slippery slope of no expectations. And for school districts, putting more money into them, they always want more money. I understand that, but when do we see the actual result of increased investment in terms of, students actually showing up? We know what chronic absenteeism looks like. Reading, mathematics, graduation, retention, all these things. Like, we just don't talk about it like this way in California anymore. It's all about the inputs, putting more into a broken system that has yet to actually demonstrate any kind of benefit for Black and brown special education or English language learners. So kudos to Texas for that.
Yeah, I mean, just for them to have any type of accountability structure at all is pretty dope. I'm gonna look at it like this, right? I think it can be government overreach and it can be accountability, but I think let me just, because there's nuance here. Let me define what I mean when I say government overreach, right? Like, government standards. Let's look at it on like a grading system. And government standards is usually about at a D or C level, meaning like if you go beneath this, like this isn't what the standard should be. This is just like the bare minimum, right? So let's think about it. Your water should be clean at X level. Like, I remember reading The Jungle, and it's like, okay, here's the standard for meat. Meat can have X amount of bone, excrement. Like, if you read The Jungle, you might not eat meat again, right?
May not eat meat again, man.
But what the book The Jungle was doing was showing you, look, man, at the federal, at the bare minimum, this is what should be happening. And if a state says at the bare minimum, I don't know, let's go crazy and say 50% of Black kids or kids living in poverty should be able to read. And then over a 5-year period, not only do you not hit that metric, there's not even any growth, then I think that is accountability. Yeah. Here's what I think government overreach is, and the same thing but flipped. I think it is government overreach when you have shitty schools in poor neighborhoods, but then you lock those young people into those shitty schools in said neighborhood and make their parents criminals if they try to leave. But it's okay if you have money to go to a private school wherever you can afford to go. I think that can be a form of government overreach, right? So I think there's some nuances there. But here's the thing, and you point this out, Omar and David. I know we've experienced this together. You're right. Anytime a school closes, especially a Black school or a brown school, we will yell to the holy heavens about racism and structural racism and environment and everything, right? And here's the thing. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. And also, a lot of these people don't have the benefit of having attended a bunch of other schools or gone to a bunch of other places. And if my great-grandfather went to this high school, regardless of how crappy it is or not, you take that away. You're taking away something that is of me and is mine. It is. I understand the concept of fighting for crumbs. When you ain't got meat on your plate, then them crumbs might not mean a lot to a lot of other people, but they mean a lot to you. So I get that there's a lot of emotion that gets tied up into that. And I'm saying this as somebody who's had to close schools before. I'm saying this as being part of that structure when there was a fiscal deficit and certain things had to happen. So not to be long-winded or to kick this horse even while it's dead, but I want people out there listening to be able to get the nuances that come with that.
Yeah. Let's kick the horse.
I think we should kick it because traditional schools, I think they should be held as accountable as charter schools are, let's say in California.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
And a lot of people think, so this is the knock, right? People say, well, charter schools open up and then they just close and then they're gone. Well, let me tell you why. Because when charter schools open in California, I'm not speaking to other places. What is it, 3-year or 5-year cycle? It depends, but it's 5 years. You come up for review every 5 years. That means that board, whoever authorized that charter, whether it was a local board, whether it was a county board, a state board, whomever, they get to say, hey, you didn't do X. Like, and so for that reason, you're closing. Here's the other thing they get to do, though. They get to set a new level of standards. Okay, so the charter school needs to perform up here, even though your other school that's serving the same population is serving down here. And it's like, oh, wow, the other thing you can do in that system is you can close schools from politically motivated standpoints that have nothing to do with how good they're operating. And so, but all you will read is, well, this school is defunct. This school has closed. This school is at this. These people cut and run. And it's probably true that they got shut down. But if the traditional local school went through the same level of scrutiny, there'd be probably a lot of shut down schools. So,
yep.
You know,
we got very close in Oakland. We actually had a framework, which sounds like part of the framework that may exist in Texas, that Omar's talking about. But we got close in Oakland we didn't get close. We had developed a framework and prototyped it and piloted a framework of school quality reviews based on the charter renewal process, right? We looked at the charter renewal process and we broke it down into not a 5-year, but an actual 3-year cycle, not the full renewal, but a lighter version of the renewal for every public district school in Oakland. And it was working, it was functioning. We could look at like side-by-side indicators. And it obviously got, abandoned because it was shining a light on schools that were struggling, that needed more resources. And, the union basically kicked it because it was an accountability measure, but it was also a measure and a metric and a system to identify what schools needed more resources. But anything, when you rank, when you put a number to it, when you put a percentage to it, unions tend to shy away from that unless it's about the percentage of, schools are able to unionize, or the percentage of dues, or these types of things. So the reason this all matters is because in the context of school district takeovers, fortunately in Texas, they have a system that is built up around like academic and operational accountability. We don't even have that in California. In California, it's just like, you're $100 million in debt. We're going to take you over. You can be a school district in California that is fiscally viable, but that generates, sub 20% proficiency indicators for Black and brown kids, and you'll never show up on any kind of a radar that would initiate any kind of conversation about a takeover, right? That infrastructure just doesn't exist here. So.
Mm-hmm. Nah, man. Go. Yeah. I mean, Omar, I know we kind of just, jumped in on your topic. I put a note there. And I got a note in the chat for you as well. But yeah, man, where you at on this, brother? Like, how do you want, like, because I mean, there was a good comment there, and if you want to go through it, we can. I mean,
it's a great comment.
Well, you want to just go there now? I mean, because
no, I got a couple things, and then I want to jump in,
and then we'll go from there. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. So I'd say we jump in, right after this, 5 minutes from now, because Thomas, thank you, man. That was outstanding. One of the things that I want to add to the conversation that for y'all to think about is two things, what's going on in the state of Texas. So most of the time, school closures or even like takeovers are incredibly controversial. What happens in the state of Texas, which I have to give an immense amount of credit for, is that finally what they're doing is the right thing. Schools that are not doing well are not only getting a ton of technical support from the Texas Education Agency, they're getting funding to support specific initiatives, literacy initiatives, tutoring initiatives. So there's both money and support and guidance from the state of Texas to be like, do these things, and you should be able to recapitulate your rating. So it's not just that like Houston is like, I don't know what happened, we were doing fine. It's like, nah, dude, like even after all the support you were getting from the state of Texas, the school was still failing kids, sending them and condemning them into poverty for 9 years straight. That's where a state has to be like, yo, we sent you, it's like that old parable. It's like, I was drowning in the sea, right? And, sailboat comes by and they're like, no, man, God's going to save me. I don't need you. Thank you for coming by. And then a canoe comes by and they're like, hey man, you need some help, you're drowning. The guy's like, no man, God's gonna save me. Then if the cruise ship comes by, it's like, no man, God's gonna save me. Dude dies, he's up in heaven. He's like, God, why did you save me? And he's like, I sent you a sailboat, a canoe, and a yacht to come pick you up. Like, what are you doing? So in the state of Texas, I've got to give an incredible amount of credence to that level of support. Now, I feel y'all, because what I like what's going on is that in the state of Texas, I'm a charter school. If I don't get on par academics for 3 years out of like the 5 that I have, shut down. Like, forget about you're getting support. They gave schools like us support after the first year. Then you got 2 years to turn it around, and that's it. They will shut you down.
They'll shut you down in year 3, after year 3, before
after
your 5
year
years
3,
is up?
exactly. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, just straight up, like, later, dude. Done. You're done. Like, you're failing kids. Why do we give you a charter to begin with? Toast. And what I think is happening now is that the state of Texas is finally saying, why are we not holding these traditional schools as accountable as we are the charters? Because this whole misnomer about charters not being accountable, I'm just so sick and tired of that old school horse shit. It's just so dumb, so played out. It's the most lazy ass talking point from the unions that I've heard, because it's like, like, if we can blame charter schools for all our woes, we don't have to look at the systemic issues that are plaguing our system to actually help our Black and brown kids, because those are usually the kids in these failing schools. So the reason that this can get controversial is because the state can not only take over a school district, which they have, they can just straight up be like, every administrator in that school fired, every teacher fired. We're doing a complete rehiring process. And at that point, people are like, why are you getting rid of these good people? They've been doing well. And it's like, well, I guess they haven't been doing that well. So that's where it gets into the government overreach and accountability. But that's just what I wanted to chime in. Gents, if you got some topics that you want to discuss there, cool. Or we can dive right into Thomas's point.
Well, as we go into Thomas's point, I would just say, I think the reason why you keep hearing that is because it's an easy argument to make. It's demagoguery almost, right? Because it's something that's quick and easy that a lay person can grab onto, and there's always rooted in some truth, right? Like, it is true that those traditional schools might be underfunded, right? What you probably don't know is you probably don't know what the process was of your principal who had some fiscal authority over that budget and made certain decisions around it, right? What I've always had to kind of explain is people would say things, well, we should fire people from Central. We should get rid of Central. But in the same breath, they'll say, but we need therapists, and we need mentors, and we need support for our teachers. And what I would have to explain to people in Oakland was, well, when you push to fire Central office, those push-in services are part of Central office, right? Like, it's not enough for you to just, change the superintendent's salary, which if you actually look at the full budget, it tends to be a drop in the bucket. It's more of a symbolic thing that people get to kind of throw their vitriol at, right? But those central costs are usually those extra things that you need and that you want. And what I would say to people that don't want to see their schools close or whatnot, this is what we did in Oakland, Omar. And David, you were around for this. I went to Lafayette Elementary School. I led a process where eventually Lafayette would have to move or whatever the case was. Years prior, we tried to rally the community 4 or 5 years before. And we said, listen, enrollment is dropping. This building can hold X amount. I don't remember the number, but just for round numbers, let's say it can hold 500 students, right? Mm-hmm. Enrollment is at 125. Yeah. And next year is going to be less. We still have to pay the same bills regardless of what is happening. And there are legal ramifications. There's legal things that we have to do in the name of that building if it is this much under. We need your support. We need you to come in and show support now. We need you to get people to try to come to this place now. We need to have talks and do things with the community at this place now. So in 5 years, when it's just we can't kick that can, we can't get an infusion of one-time money again, we have a structural deficit issue. It's not coming as a surprise. And guess what happened? 3 or 4 years later, right? the school had to move. It had to have a cohabilitation piece. Things had to happen because the enrollment of it was so low. But there are people that are then showing up in that process and saying, well, this is racist, this is that. And again, I think everything is damn near racist if you go back deep enough. But this was one of those moments where you're trying to like involve and engage people early. And I just think that as long as these type of processes are that complicated and nuanced, I think that the union will continue to kick ass as far as like how you explain these things, because they don't have to explain any of that. Yeah. All they got to say is, Omar, you live in a brown community and they closing the last brown high school. And it's because they want these privatizers to come in and you ain't going to let that happen. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And as a decent person, you're going to be like, no, this is terrible. And I never fought the community. My vitriol will go to those leaders that understand and know the nuances and leave it out because they're trying to make a larger statement.
So this is I've got one quick thing to add, and then Omar, you got to jump in and let's dive into Thomas's comments, because that's a great comment. Thank you, Tyler.
Now, Thomas, we're giving you time so you can go share this with people and have people buzz in, because we're gonna go in too deep on your comments. So get your people. Go ahead, David.
So again, we are talking about state takeovers of public school districts, and they don't all look the same. Right. Mm-hmm. In some, it can be like a light takeover, and in others, it can be a full-blown takeover where the school board where full local control is taken away. Right. And what happens under a school district takeover is you essentially lose democracy, and you gain efficiency. I don't sound like a ruthless, soulless economist, but you gain efficiency to do things like close schools or like reconstitute administration or reconstitute, whatever it is. It's a lot easier because you have more control, because some of the rules kind of get thrown out the window. So it's the trade-off between democracy and efficiency, right? Now, looking back over maybe say like a 30-year period, what we know based on research by a political scientist from Rutgers, Domingo Morel, in his book Takeover, is that the majority of school district takeovers have had a greater impact on Black communities, because when Black communities face a school district takeover, they are more likely to face the more extreme full loss of democracy, full loss of local control. These are facts. These are things that we can debate, but essentially the data says what it is. Predominantly Black school districts are more likely to be taken over, Morel documents, and those takeovers are more likely to fully remove the elected school board. I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing. I think it's interesting to say, like, those things are happening. And you might be able to pair that with the argument that like standardized tests are racist, right? Well, maybe there's some racism mixed in there, and maybe it's just like, we haven't quite really figured out how to equip school districts to serve the needs of Black and brown children, right? Or we haven't equipped school districts with management that can fully and properly manage a school district that predominantly serves low-income Black and brown kids, right? So I felt like that might have been a good segue to Thomas's comment. Omar.
Yeah, I want to jump all over that, because getting into this comment, we'll circle back to what you were just talking about. But, Thomas came out and said it's cool that there's oversight here, because I'd be interested to hear what state you're coming to us from, Thomas, where there isn't as much oversight. But he basically talked about the paradox and that, like, a school gets closed.
Wait, if you're gonna talk about that, let's just go ahead and why don't you just read his comment and then
absolutely.
Yeah.
So verbatim, this is a very good discussion. Thanks, man. School choice can be beneficial, but there has to be good oversight. I'm in a state where there isn't real oversight. And regarding the school closing, regarding the school closing paradox, parents and community members know what happens when institutions are closed and removed from their neighborhoods. Empty buildings, less support. Schools serve as a de facto community, hubs, parks, meeting spaces. A promise that something better is coming would go a long way, but usually that's not the case. And what I want to kind of chime into with this really well thought out comment is that I also want to ensure that we're not conflating a school, or excuse me, the state taking over a school district and then essentially what the ramifications are, as opposed to like school closures. So we'll use Houston ISD as an example, right? Wheatley High School that's been failing for 9 years. What are they going to do? Well, they're not shutting down Wheatley straight up. What Houston ISD is going to have happen is, like I said, they're going to have their entire board fired. A board of managers is going to come in and take over. A brand new superintendent's going to take over. And what they're essentially going to do is create a sense of urgency around how do we actually solve this problem and give Wheatley the money, the resources, and the attention that they need to turn around. The irony of it is that like my ass as a charter school would have been shut down after year 3. These cats have been doing some, whatever for 9 years. The state, or excuse me, the school district didn't have any sense of urgency on helping them get out. 9 years later, they're languishing. Now the school district's going to have to take over. But first, Thomas, in this scenario, we're actually going to try to help Wheatley to stay open. I think when David and Doc were talking about the scenarios in Oakland where schools are incredibly under-enrolled, yeah, there's this promise that something better is coming, and then the community gets excited, but then nothing happens. They'll shut down the school, they'll grab those kids, they'll bus them to another school. It just happened here in El Paso. So schools that were under-enrolled in Segundo Barrio, specifically Lorenzo de Zavala Elementary and Bell Elementary, those kids are now getting bused across the highway to a brand new school, and the community's up in arms because those schools are gone. And this is kind of a different topic, and this is kind of a pet peeve of mine, but I'm just going to chime in with my opinion, Thomas, because I think just shutting down schools is dumb as hell. I think it lacks intelligence, it lacks foresight, and it lacks a plan, because they're like, we're just going to ship our kids to this other school. And I'm like, yo, like, why don't you, like, both these schools are from like 1952, 1962. They're like terrible places, man. Like, why not tear these places down and rebuild a brand new, amazing school, like in that community, that can house the kids that are there, that gives them something new, that gives them something better, that gives them something exciting, that says, as a school district, we realize that these 3 schools may not be necessary, but let's incorporate it into this cool, centralized, brand new campus that's yours, that's new, that's futuristic, that has these meeting places, that has these hubs, that has more parks, that is addressing the needs of the community. Because really all it is like a dichotomy. Either it's open or it's closed, versus here's this awesome alternative. And I think that's a poor way for a school district to win. But this is why I have no problem with these people getting like taken over. I see what happens with politically elected school boards, and people are like, this is democracy in action, and this is the people being represented. I'm like, the fuck it is, dude. This is a group of sycophantic narcissists who are out for their own political agenda, who are using the school board as a springboard for their own political aspirations, don't understand a budget, don't understand academics, don't understand long-term planning. They're a bunch of charlatans. So to have the state come in and be like, yo, screw you, I'm going to take you out, is what's up. And I think that's a great option, because look, that's not a solution for curing what's going on in these high schools. But what it does do is finally put some accountability on a school district to be like, why aren't you paying attention to these schools, most of which are Black and brown? Yo, TEA, Texas Education Agency, had to come and spank Austin ISD's behind to be like, yo, why are you taking care of your special education students? We had to come spank you for you to do the right thing. And like, look, like maybe I was raised like super Latino and think that that's okay, but I'm all for that spanking. But it's still contingent upon the school district to solve the damn problem. And this gets back to David's issue, which is who in this space is going into these schools and saying, we are solving the crisis for Black and brown kids. And
but here's the thing, and because that's not popular, right? It's popular when the school is already in disarray and closing. This is where political education stars get built, right? This is where people start doing hunger strikes. This is where people start doing all these other things. And I'm not saying that those people's hearts weren't in the right place, but I do feel like there's a different level of information and knowledge that some people have, and they're using and sometimes pimping the emotionality and just the feelings of a community, because a school closing sucks. It's hard and it's terrible, but I promise you that in most cases, maybe not all, but in most cases, people don't just wake up one day and say the school has to close. It is usually a year-over-year process where things are happening and people are asking for support. Yep. And I think that that's the piece. So if you got a school, listen, I am a millennial. I'm gonna be 40 years old this year. Growing up, you just grew up with these institutions, right? You saw it like your church, your hospital. Guess what? The hospital that I was born in Maywood, Illinois, which is called Westlake, which is also the middle school, the same name of the middle school I went to in California. I think that's why my dad picked it, but it is closed. Like, things are closing now. The churches that I've grown up in places like Oakland, where gentrification is rolling in like a steamroller. And like, you know, for those that know Oakland geography, I'll help you out. There are people that live in a place called Oakland. There used to be a lot of Black people. There used to be a lot of Black churches. There used to be a lot of Black schools. And then over the years, that congregation moved out further, and they would move out 10 miles, 20 miles, 50 miles. And then at some point, they find a church home in Antioch where they now have to live. And they're not driving an hour over, and then that church is closed down. We are in a time where things that we thought would never be able to shut down have. Like, there was, you know, David, you were around for this place called Woolworths. Like, you were around for, what are the major institutions you grew up that were just there? And you like, this will never shut down, right? Like, yeah, man. Yeah. What was it? Woolworth? I mean, they're just.
Hey, I refuse to participate in this conversation.
I don't, man. Crest.
I mean, like,
now Montgomery Wards is done.
Montgomery Ward, right? Like Montgomery. Like, there. And what I'm saying is, if you are Black, brown, poor, a lot of things that you hold dear are in danger. A lot of things that you hold dear do need your support, and they need you there. And if you have a school, a traditional school in your neighborhood that you love, that you want your kids to be there, then by God, they usually have some type of community group. It's usually in their charter. It's usually written out that they have to have some shared governance model, and that model usually has equal amount of school staff and equal amount of parent community leadership. And you have to get on those boards, and you have to ask about these finances and what is happening. Because once it gets to that conversation of if we need to close down, trust me, a lot of time has been lost. Things have been waged, and it might be too late. And I'm talking to you as a community member. I'm talking to you as somebody. You will never have as much information as the people in those schools and in that district leadership unless you go and find it and ask for it. Now, if you want to just say, look, I just send my kid there and I just do this, and that's fine. And that is your right. But I'm telling you, it's possible that things can close under your nose. David?
Yeah, I mean, I think we got some more comments coming in too. We should get to those. Yeah, but I think the idea of there's a whole world in between a healthy functioning school and a school where less than 10% of the children are proficient in reading and math, and what you can do in that space. We're not talking about individual teachers. We're not talking about site leaders. We're talking about state takeovers of school districts. So we're talking about superintendents, about central office administrators. We're talking about the leadership administrative teams and how they choose to run their school districts or how they choose to not run them, right? And the real consequences behind that. Academics are related to enrollment. Over time, if students are not thriving academically in your school district, Believe me, parents will vote with their feet. They vote with their feet. You have less students, and unless you right size, you're going to find yourself as a school district in some kind of fiscal crisis, right? And then it's an exponential, situation from there, where it's very hard to recover. My point here is that there are tools, right? We're talking about a particular school or a number of high schools, and I want to bring up the concept of school reform, right? People talk about reformers, the bad word of like people in education. The school reformers. Well, I was a principal for more than 10 years, and I was a reformer because as a leader and even as a teacher in your craft, you're always trying to do things better and different to have a more positive impact for your students, for your staff, and for your community. That's reform. Reform just means change. It means active change. You are constantly reforming to meet the needs of your community. And when you fail to have those systems in place at the site level, at a regional level, at a district level, then you have no tools to pull from your toolbox to actually improve educational services for children. And then the impact is declining enrollment. And then the impact is a fiscal crisis. And the impact is like, we're going to get taken over by the state. So both of these things, the fiscal issue that Omar is talking about, that we talk about in California, and the academic issues are 100% related. And you know what? Both of them impact Black and brown students the most. The second thing I'm going to say is that I understand, like, it's not all about ELA and mathematics and these things. Those are standardized metrics are very important. However, we have to have a standard around what constitutes a good and a healthy school for young people. Like, would you let your children go and play in a park that had closed bathrooms and, needles from drug use and, people smoking crack and people driving cars on the grass in a public space? No, you want a nice public park with good grass, functioning bathrooms, safe boundaries, safe passage, right?
Look, man, if it had a basketball court, it didn't matter. I done played on. I'm sure you played on. I'm sure you played soccer in one of them places before, bro. Where it's like, hey, scoot that shit over. We playing here.
So these things go hand in hand, right? The condition of the schools, the condition of the public parks, and somehow people have gotten accustomed to accepting, less than for Black and brown children. Absolutely. And I think that's a shame. So that's from Oakland to Chicago.
Yeah, man. I mean, Omar, you just did a kick-ass job with this topic, and I think, I know we winding down, but and just I'll read some of these comments, and because my comment is tied to one of these. Miss Batts Esquire said, I've taught students who've gone to 5 or 6 different schools in a 3-year span, basically due to school closures. She added gentrification, school closing go hand in hand. The undesirable schools were just not worth performing, it seems, until the gentry came in. I love what G2 Brown said. They want their cities back. And then also the right size. It doesn't make sense, though, because the same schools that are right size are repopulated with non-traditional public schools that have even less enrollment. I agree with everything she said except for the last one. And the only reason I say that is because I've been part of a right size thing. Is they end up getting more bodies. But for instance, let's say in that building, that elementary school that held 500 students, it was supposed to hold 500 K5 students. Now, when that thing, whether it's the same building or whatever, now there's probably a K12 in there. Now there's probably, K5 with like some district offices in there now. Like, it is being reutilized, repurposed in different type of ways. Sometimes it is just some BS, but sometimes, as in the case of Oakland, let me just stay with Oakland. Let me stay with what I know very well. Oakland has a structural deficit. Let me tell you what a structural deficit is. It means that year over year, the cost of the things that you want and need to function are more than the monies available. This gets confusing for people, and I'm not shaming or shitting on any person, but I know that this is not your day-to-day business. So I want to offer, because I felt this. We might have a billionaire come in and drop $50 million or $100 million. Here's why you still have to make the changes. That is a one-time infusion of cash to help you get to that road before you make changes. What Oakland collectively does since I was a child is that they will get these infusions of cash, and then they won't change anything in the structure.
Correct.
And then guess what? That money just gets burned up.
Yep.
And you still are right back in the same situation. Oakland had a plan to close X amount of schools. Now, where the schools were and which schools got closed, we can debate that. I think that's actually a very valid debate. Mm-hmm. But Oakland has 80 plus schools for a population that has dropped by more than 10,000 people.
More.
And by way more, right? I'm being conservative because I don't want to misspeak, David. But by by at least 10,000 people within the last decade. And here's the thing. People can choose schools in Oakland. So what's happening is people are voting with their feet. So people are saying, I don't want my kid to go to that school. I want them to go to this school. So when the school that nobody chose closes, then it becomes an emotional piece that rallies everybody. But this is now 10 years in the making, not 10 weeks. So I love this conversation because it allows us an opportunity to be community members. I went to schools in Oakland. I lived in shelters in Oakland. I transferred schools a lot. I've been part of schools that have closed. And then when I learned how these schools function, how the finances roll, and we've had people in leadership afraid to make the decisions that leaders have to make, it hurts those communities way more in the long run. And it does leave Black, brown, and poor people more vulnerable because not only do they not have a large population, when we're talking about Black people, brown people have a larger population, but in Oakland, Black people don't. They also become the most vulnerable because it's harder for them to move as a block. And so anyway, I don't want to get too, like I said, emotionally into that piece, but I do hope that people that may not be working in the space can take this, and not saying that everything I say is right or whatever, because I actually haven't said how I felt about it. But I hope that if you are curious or you have strong feelings about it, that it pushes you to go and look more into your local system and the school that you care about and ask about those finances and when those shared governance meetings are happening, because you can be a part of that.
Jump straight up, man. Straight up. We're winding down, so I think we got to get into closing thoughts.
Hey, brother.
We're like 50
direct us, Omar. It's you, brother. Who's going first, man? It's all you, brother.
All right, man. I'm happy to kind of get us started, and then David, you want to follow up? Cole, you want to?
There you go, brother.
Steer us into the end.
Don't ask us. You get to tell us, B. This is your show. This is your show today.
Mine are gentle suggestions connoting this is what we're doing. So. Couple things here. One, I want to make sure that we create this dichotomy between school closures and a state coming and taking over a school district. So as we were talking about a school district getting taken over, it's really this accountability measure. Now people are going to be like, well, where's the data of the improvements that have happened when a state takes over a school district? And I'm like, look, you're cool. You're asking the wrong question. The data should be what was so screwed up that school district had ignored for years upon years upon years that would institute the level of accountability for a state to come in and say, we're wiping out your superintendent and your school district. We're hiring new people and we're going to be watching over you, but you need to solve the problem. Because really, all of those gestures for the last 9 years in Houston with Wheatley High School didn't solve the problem with Wheatley High School, because the school district didn't have enough urgency or animo or initiative or foresight to say, we got to do something about this school. Those are your Black and brown schools. So I love the fact that the state came in and is like, you're not serving Black and brown kids. Or like they did in Austin, you're straight up not serving special education kids. So spank right on the behind, get your crap together. Otherwise, we're just going to take you over. And like, that's the last thing that you want, is to have the state running your shit. As far as school closures are concerned, I do want to talk about what Ms. Batts Esquire's got to say, which is exactly what Doc said. These processes take years. And where are the parents then years before this is happening, organizing, getting information, galvanizing, figuring out what's going on so that they can actually create what I thought was such a brilliant comment by Thomas, which is the promise of something better. Because that's exactly what these school districts should be offering, is something better. Not yes or no, but we've understood the problem and we're going to effectively solve it. And that's the thing that I've got beef with. I don't think these school districts have any remote ability to critically problem solve and solve these issues. If they did, they'd be doing it, but they ain't. And that's why they're getting the state coming in and spanking their ass, as they should. I don't want to go off on too long of a rant because we got to wrap up, but I do want to sell to Brandon. I'm with you, man. I think that these quote words that people love to use, like reform and equity, are horse shit. I think what it is just a mask for them to come in with their agenda that suits their needs to infiltrate, pump money into situations and not actually solve the conundrum for low-income education. It just makes them feel great. What it is just like the white savior syndrome. And then what they do is, we pumped in all this money, let's cook the books to make it look good, and then let's leaving that community, as Dr. Cole so eloquently said, without any changes in the systems that would effectively work 20 years after these people come in with their reforms and their infusions and everything else. So I'm with you all, ladies and gentlemen. And this has been this wrap up for me from the South Star Classroom. I'm going to pitch it to David, then Doc, you send us out.
Cool. Thank you, Omar. Great show. Thank you for putting this together. Great topic. I'm not going to address the entirety of Brandon's comment here, but I want to thank Brandon for tuning in. I think this is another show that we should jump onto. Just the the kind of regional approach to education reform and philanthropy in general. So I appreciate Brandon for bringing that up. That's a great point, and we should put a note there to address that. And it will probably get us all canceled, and that's fine, but we'll do it anyways. I agree. I support stronger metrics and stronger accountability for both, on the fiscal side of school districts operating, well-functioning school districts. And I also support, stronger and clearer and more collaborative, minded measures around accountability. I think, I'm talking from a California lens. In California, we've essentially lost course on that around clear accountability. And, young people get one chance. We might develop another system in 10 years, but if your child is in school today and they're a second grader, they get one chance, right? And I feel like, we have systems that we've developed before. We don't need to redevelop systems. We just need to learn about other states and adapt practices that we're seeing across the board. And then I think, finally, we're talking about school districts going under state takeover. School districts are overseen by elected school boards, right? And what we know is that, especially in urban areas, in a lot of these areas where school districts have actually been taken over, the school board seat has been used as a place for novice rising politicians to step into the political space to better understand how government works. And after a 3 or 4 year term, they cycle off into a higher office, right? So this whole concept of the stepping board of the school board to launch somebody's political career is something that we also have to talk about, because I feel at the end of the day, anybody can get elected, and it takes you 3 years to figure out how to do your job, and then 1 year how to launch your campaign for your next office. And in that 4 year term, have you helped children? You haven't. And so I think there's another topic there that I look forward to jumping into in the future. I'll leave it there, and I will hand it off to Dr. Cole.
Man, thank you. This has been an incredible show. Thank you to all that have tuned in and your comments, everybody from Brandon to Bass Esquire, everybody. And we hope that you continue to and join into the debates. Like if any of you are wanting to come on, just shoot us a message and we'll figure, something out. I'll just say this, man. We gave you a lot of technical things about how this happens. And I know there's a lot of emotion. And I know that a lot of times the technical doesn't always match up with the emotional, because there have been wrongs that have happened. And I'm going to say this as somebody who grew up in these schools. I'm going to say as somebody who went to schools, and these schools look like prisons. Actually, I've been in prisons before. I visited them. Prisons had better equipment than some of the schools that I went to. I love that I went to Lafayette Elementary School. It's the same place Huey P. Newton went. And the school that I went to was not fit for me as a child at that time. And in his seminal book, Dr. Huey P. Newton starts out, before any chapter, he talks about how bad the Oakland public schools were and how he basically would not allow his kids to go there in one form or another. Here's the thing, man. I come from that generation. I'm just going to say this. If you are so lucky to go to a school in your community that is doing well by you, God bless you. To the people that I know, that I love, that look like me, and we got dotted lines to each other, I'm going to tell you, don't ever put your faith in any of those structures. They're not built for you. They're not serving you. And if they are serving you, it's not often at the level of quality that one deserves. And, and that's the thing. We have to start acting like consumers of this stuff and not just taking what people offer you. I remember being very, very nervous to send food back. I grew up really poor, and then I started making a little bit of money. I got a salary, and I would order food at a restaurant, and sometimes it just would not be what I ordered. Like it might be overcooked or whatever the case is. But I had to learn how to be okay sending things back when I pay for it. Because believe it or not, whether you know it or not, you are paying for these schools. You are paying for a product. You are owed some level, some modicum of service, and you are the consumer of that thing. But we don't like to talk about it in those terms because they want you to be on this cerebral level. Damn all that. Damn that. Because I didn't know until I went to all those other schools. I didn't know until I became an adult and I visited schools for a living and I saw what other kids like me were able to get, that then I started to have feelings about the damn places that I was in, because that's all I knew. That's all I knew was that crap. So some schools should close. Some schools should be saved. And in any of those things, you as a consumer, you as a parent who has to send your most blessed asset into those buildings every single day, you should play a part in that. But you can't play a part of it if you don't know how it works. You can't play a part of it if you can just have your feelings manipulated every time when it's too late. But guess what? Them damn teachers don't be talking to you until it's time for them to strike. And then they know how to talk to you then. They know how to look you in your eye then. They know how to get you on their side then. So we end up fighting harder in Black communities for white women who are not teaching our kids well than we fight for our own kids who have to sit in those places. So this is bigger than state takeover. This show is built in order for you to be equipped. So regardless of how you feel about what the hell a Charles or an Omar or a Jubilee or a David says, it is built so you can have some tools and weapons in your toolkit, because you are the only person that has to live with the consequences and the results of said school.
Hell yeah.
I'm Charles. That's Omar. That's David. We will see you all next time.
Man. And before we sign out, Ms. Botts, Esquire, we are also a consulting firm. You want us to come out to Indiana, hit us up, get into our DMs, email us. We are ready to go to any district or any organization that is open enough to understand how they can grow and be reform-minded. Hit us up as a consultancy. Didn't mean to cut you off, Doc, but I always got to condone the fact that we are a consultancy first and a show second.
Absolutely. And as I close and we say goodbye, I am not talking about us as just a consumer. but I am talking about us as we should still have a consumer mindset, because when we start, quality will never come if you never demand it. And so with that being said, we will see you all next week, same bad time, same bad station. Peace out.